What is a fucked up memory you have from your childhood that you didn't realize was fucked up until you grew older? First story. I went to primary school with a girl called Cheyenne. One day when we were about 8 to 10 years old, we had detention together. The teacher left the room and this girl immediately launched into sexual talk. From 0 to 100 real quickly. No clear understanding of where it came from. I am not even sure what she said to me, maybe because I did not fully understand it. She grabbed a pencil and masturbated under the desk. She told me in full detail what she was doing. I did not fully understand what was going on, and I wondered if it hurt, but I never liked her, so I did not really care. I tried to ignore her because I was not interested enough in what she was doing to ask any of the questions in my head. I just remember thinking, this is wrong, I feel violated, but I could not figure out why. There was also a boy in my class, same age, who would grab girls' buttocks and slide his fingers in the crack, like a credit card. He did it to a couple of girls and said some filthy things to us. We knew enough to know it was wrong, but not enough to do anything about it. He targeted me specifically for a few weeks. I remember being extremely shy, so I was excited that I had a new friend. I very quickly became afraid of him. I have not thought about any of this for years. Second story. When I was in preschool, I remember a girl that had small circular burns on her arm. She said her dad ran over cigarettes with the lawnmower. Years later, I was watching some movie where someone puts a cigar out on their arm, and it all flooded back to me, and I realized her dad was probably putting them out on her and doing who knows what else. I can still remember how nice she was. I just wish I knew her name so I could try and see how she is. Third story. So when I was a kid, there was this massive hill at the back of our subdivision. So naturally, we all wanted to ride our bikes down it and stuff. And my mom always said we were not allowed back there. Eventually, I started bugging her about why, and she said a dangerous man lived up there. As I got older, it turned out he had been arrested for kidnapping a child about 30 years before. I never really thought about it, but the first time I went trick-or-treating without my parents, I decided to stop there instead of skipping it like usual. He handed out those tiny things of Play-Doh, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. It was not until recently that I realized he probably did that so no one thought he was drugging kids. Fourth story. I knew this was pretty messed up as a kid. Anyway, I had a female hamster that ended up having 2 babies but rejected them. My well-meaning uncle put them in a separate cage with some shavings and fluff and put them into the oven on as low as it could go with the door open to try and help keep the baby hamsters warm. We discovered slow-cooked baby hamster a few hours later. It might have been the next morning, not too sure how long they were in there for. I remember that they had baked to the bottom of the cage. Fifth story. My and 3 of my cousins, ages 5 to 10, ate some bad bake sale cookies my grandmother had in her freezer. We all ended up feeling weird, and my grandmother let us all sleep over. I found out a few months ago that they were weed cookies. She had made them for my grandfather, but us sneaky little brats found them and ate one each. She called our parents, and I guess they all decided the best thing to do to punish my grandmother for letting this happen was to make her watch 4 stoned kids all night. Sixth story. My uncle tried to take me to a hotel alone so I could see what a waterbed was like in person. I was 14, and he had just gotten out of prison, although I did not know at the time what he was in prison for. I said no because I thought my parents would not approve. I found out years later he was in prison for raping little girls. A lot of you are asking why he was allowed to be around family members, specifically me or other cousins my age. It is hard to explain to someone not in a dysfunctional family. Denial is very powerful, and all of the adults, especially my grandparents, wanted to believe he was wrongfully charged. I was lucky, others were not. He traded a drug addict his car for her infant baby girl. He had her for 6 months before we could intervene and get the girl to safety. He was not sentenced in that case due to errors in the case and it getting thrown out of court. We found out last year he was using social media to lure in teenage girls to meetings. We turned him into the Federal Bureau of Investigation, but they have not been able to get enough evidence for an arrest. Seventh story. I always had a memory of 2 people fighting and me watching it from my father's car. I always thought it was a dream until my grandmother told me the story of it. When I was 2.5 years old, my mother kidnapped me and my father chased her with his car. Some neighbors blocked my mother's way and my father basically threw me in the backseat of his car. He wanted to drive away, but my cuckoo mother put her hands on the front of the car and refused to move. My father just simply got out, kicked my mother's legs so hard she collapsed. Then he drove away and took me to my grandparents' house. I never saw my mother after that, and I am thankful. What I thought was a very vivid dream turned out to be my very first memory of my father being a total badass. To give you guys a little bit of a backstory, my mother wanted custody over me, and since she was losing, she thought this would work. This was not the only fucked up thing she did. She locked me up in a house full of cats, which resulted in me getting horribly sick, body full of scratches, now allergic to cats. She poured shampoo in my eyes if I cried. She beat me and her other child. She locked my father in her house, called the police, and said that my father abused her. She was an abuse lying scumbag, so of course my father was on his last straw with her. My father tried to take care of her other child too, but she disappeared with the child. So yes, please do not make any assumptions about my father. He gave me the official documents a few months ago. It is a 15-page long ordeal. I have also met a lot of social workers and witnesses who help my family. My father is a superhero for me. Single fathers are awesome. Eighth story. It was 1980. There were 4 of us on the 4th of July, all between the ages of 6 and 8. We were playing on a place called The Island in my tiny, tiny little neighborhood. This guy pulled up in a light blue Monte Carlo. He said, "Hey kids, want to come see my snake?" So we all ran over there and crowded his passenger window. He had a shoebox with a tiny baby snake. Then he put the box down on the passenger seat and revealed that he also had his penis out. We all laughed and screamed and ran. 1980. Nobody really said anything or cared. We were all just like, that man was crazy. Ninth story. My friend taught me about sex when we were about 6 or 7. She told me what adults do and showed me an erotic drawing from her parents' bedroom. My father and stepmother, with whom she lived, were definitely alcoholics and probably did drugs too. And her older teenage step-brother was super skeevy. It was only after I got to high school that I realized that some of the things she used to say to me about sex were super messed up. She should not have known as much as she did at the age we were, and I highly suspect now that she was being sexually abused by someone. I just wanted to say that just because children know about sex at a young age does not mean that they are all being molested. It is extremely normal and common to be curious about our bodies and play act things we see adults do or in movies. Even learning the word sex can come from anywhere, and when you are a child, you want to share what you learn with your friends. That is normal. In my case, it was specifically the way in which she knew or talked about sex that later made me believe she was being abused. For things that were very specific, her response to the question, "How do you know this?" was, "I am allowed to do it." It was weird, and there were other things about playing with her that crossed the boundaries of being normal curiosity. 10th story. Mother and I moved houses a lot, and there was a time when we used to live in a pretty rough estate. It was a nice enough house, but I was of the age when I wanted to go outside and play with other children. Mother allowed me a lot of freedom, so I was able to go outside alone as and when I wished, provided it was not too late at night. I was 9 at the time. I did not get to be very picky with my playmates. They ranged from 6-year-old boys who threw bricks at my head to 12-year-old girls who somehow thought dating 25-year-old men was okay. I went into their homes, cesspits, 6-year-old girls with sexual posters all over their walls and makeup everywhere. Siblings under the age of 7 who knew way more about sex than I did. I went into their poorly kept homes, saw the squalor, the horrific conditions in which they lived. Mattresses covered with dirt and filth, food on the floor. It was overwhelming. It opened my eyes and made me realize my mother was either some kind of fairy princess or I was just living a much better life, and it filled me with guilt, which I did not truly understand until I grew older. Most fucked up was one day I was home alone. My mother had nipped out to the shops, which were really close by, and our front door was unlocked. One boy from one of these fucked up families, who was about 16, came into our house and cornered me. He knocked me to the ground and started to undo my trousers. I kicked him away somehow, and he ran off. I had to give a statement to the police, and he was sent away. A few weeks later, his teenage girlfriend threatened to kill me because he was sent away. Bear in mind, I was 9 myself. So yes, I got some kid put away because he attempted to rape me, and I was threatened with being killed over it. We moved shortly after, thankfully, but it was shocking to look back on it. That was a majorly fucked up neighborhood, and I am amazed my mother let me out at all. Haha. 11th story. I grew up overseas in a very rural town. Friends and I would basically live in each other's homes since our families were very close friends. I was staying with one friend for a weekend and had just woken up from a nap in the living room. I got up and started wandering around the house looking for her so we could go play. I peeped into her grandfather's bedroom and saw her in bed with her grandfather. Her grandfather had his hand between her legs, and she had her eyes shut tightly. I thought they were just cuddling while she was napping, so I just walked away and waited in the living room. We were around 6 or 7 years old. I told an aunt about it, and after that, I was not allowed to stay over anymore. But she got invited over a lot more. 12th story. My family and I went to a retreat that was supposed to be about Jesus or whatever. You know, though, the type where they sing and have you clap and stuff. At the very end, Jesus himself comes out in a golden chalice thing and he heals people. During that ceremony, a mentally disabled woman started screaming loudly. I think she may have been scared as everyone was crying and screaming as well. The priest went up to her and started screaming, "Go away, devil! Leave this woman alone! Leave!" What do you know, the disabled woman did not stop. They had her removed from the room. Needless to say, that was very disturbing. 13th story. My mother caught my father cheating with a woman from an online gaming forum sometime in the very early 2000s. They were sending each other vulgar messages. She read the messages out loud when she found them. I was about 6 years old at the time. I did not realize what any of those words meant until about 10 years later when it just clicked. Ooh. The part my 6-year-old brain was most upset about was that his forum profile picture was from a family photo on the beach, but he cropped all of us out. Why did not Daddy want me in the picture? 14th story. My mother used to take me to work with her when there was not enough money for a babysitter. From around the age of 3 to 4, I used to hang out in a dive bar most nights. The patrons were cool, used to give me change to buy lollies or buy me a pink lemonade or whatever. There were some slot machines in the back, and some of the guys let me sit on their knee and push buttons for them. I would play cards with some of them and was taught how to roll cigarettes for the older guys with arthritis. When I got tired, I would just curl up under a table and go to sleep. Looking back as a parent myself now, that is super messed up, and I am surprised no one called the authorities. It was the early 90s, but still, I know a lot of kids have good experiences in bars with their parents. So I thought I would add some detail as to why this was negative for me personally. I would be there until closing time, generally around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. My mother would not monitor me at all. I would often walk off down the road and be returned by the guy who ran the service station at the end of the street. She would run errands, buying cigarettes or whatever, and leave me there. Some of the patrons were nice and stuff, but many were pretty intimidating. Sometimes fights would break out. I remember once I cut myself on chunks of glass on the floor under the table after a fight, and my mother made me wait until the next day to take me to get stitches. I think with older kids, this probably works a bit better as they are a bit more self-sufficient, or when the other parent picks up the kid as soon as they can. I was 3 when it started. My mother was pretty neglectful at the best of times. 15th story. One of my cousins, when he was like 6, was basically molesting his young baby sister, who was 3 at the time. He used to lick her lips and tongue kiss her. The fucked up part is, he showed this to me. I was also 6, and I did not find it weird at all. Then I took a turn doing the same thing to her, and that is when it felt weird. I still shudder whenever I think about it. It seems my use of the word tonguing threw people off. I was talking about mouth-to-mouth. People. There were no genitalia involved. 16th story. My grandmother used to bully me as if she were another child. It got so bad that she made fun of my suicide attempt, made me get on my knees and beg for food on several occasions, screamed at me when I did not understand my homework, caused me to starve myself by relentlessly making fun of my weight. She had me convinced for a solid 6 months that my parents were not my real parents because I am a ginger and my mother and father are not. She made fun of my appearance in every way possible, but I knew that was fucked up. What I never understood until I was older was that my mother was wrong too. She should have cut her abusive mother out of our lives and protected me from her, not defend her even still today. I never understood until very recently how horribly that affects me even today. 17th story. Black person here. When I was in preschool, I was playing with a group of little white children during recess. We decided to play house, and the white children got to be mother, father, brother, sister, and so on. One of the little white girls handed me a plastic pail and told me to go fill it up because I had to be the slave. I did not fully understand at the time because I was very young and had just immigrated from a majority black country where I did not experience racism in any form. 18th story. Well, I knew it was pretty messed up then, but I remember when I was about 12 years old, my evil step monster chased me around the house with a butcher knife, screaming that I was the cancer of the family. I locked myself in the bathroom and crawled out of the window. On a different day, she chased me into a bathroom, broke down the door, pinned my 12-year-old self to the floor by sitting on me and holding my arms down with her knees. Then she proceeded to hit my face, chest, and arms. I went to the school nurse all black and blue the next day. The police were called, along with my father and the evil step monster. They merely made her promise to not do that again. At that point, I knew I was in trouble, ran away and lived on the streets off and on until I convinced my father to put me and my sister in a girl's home, which he did. Many moons ago, and happily, the evil step monster is dead. I would dance and spit on her grave if I knew where it was. 19th story. I was in 5th grade. I was on hall monitor duty as part of school safety patrol. I overheard a conversation that sounded strange to me and that I did not understand. 2 other 5th graders were heard having the following conversation. 5th grader first. What did your sister say? 5th grader second. She said she would do it for $60. Do you have a condom? I had never heard that word. 5th grader first. Yes, so she will meet up with me and I just bring the $60? 5th grader second. No, you bring me $80 and I set up the date. 5th grader first. But you just said 60. 5th grader second. The 60 is what she charges. The extra 20 goes to me for setting you up. I did not know the 2 boys personally. I never heard more of it. But the conversation was odd and it stood out to me. Only when I got into my teenage years did I realize bro was pimping out his sister. 20th story. One of my earliest memories, actually, about the year 1972. I was probably 3 to 4 years old. I was outside playing with the neighbor kid, who was a few years older than me, so 6 to 7 year range. He was older, so I followed his lead for most things. He proceeded to take a portion of a mostly straightened out coat hanger and cram it down the throat of a common toad, twist, and pull the poor thing inside out. Now my poor undeveloped mind did not react much. Sure, that is not right. I remember thinking that. But I did not have what you might call a what the fuck moment. More like just trying to process what happened. Maybe more of a is this what older kids do moment. But when he said, here, you try, and produced another toad, well, I passed. Fuck you, Randall, wherever you are. Probably in jail. If not, he probably deserves to be. 21st story. I was a member at some country club where we all played tennis as kids. I was like 6 or 7 at the time this happened, but one of my friends needed to go to the bathroom. I was assigned to go with him so nobody would get lost or something. As we were walking down, some dude just runs up and grabs my friend and starts forcefully carrying him down the hallway. He covered his mouth, but my friend bit him or something and started screaming. The guy just drops him and runs off. At the time, we thought nothing of it really and just kept walking to the bathroom. All the coaches were pretty fucking freaked out when we mentioned it, so they searched the building. 22nd story. My best friend when we were 7 told me her dad touched her, and it was okay because she thought she liked it. I thought, okay, my parents touch me all the time, big deal, until I got older and understood what that meant. 23rd story. The fact that I was assigned a shared locker in middle school with a drug dealer who threatened to kill me in the bathroom if I ever went into our shared locker. At the time, I was just like, okay, then I will not go in there. But now it is like, what the fuck was going on in my middle school? 24th story. When I was 10 and my cousin was 11, he taught me about condoms and how they were used for sex. Then he said, the next time you visit us, he was at our place, I will use one on you. Being the unknown, I was like, yeah, sure, and really excited about it. But now looking back on it, I see how creepy it is. 25th story. Being beaten to the point of being covered in bruises. My mom would buy makeup to cover it up, and I learned how to mix my own from the cream makeup palettes you get for Halloween costumes because it would stay longer. I did not think much of it until we had to cover up scars and other marks for theater in high school, and people asked, wow, how are you so good at this? 26th story. I was just starting my freshman year of high school, so I was 14. I cannot remember why, I think marching band, but I was at the high school around dusk one night. I realized that my parents forgot about me, and everyone else had left and locked up the school. This was 15 years ago, so I did not have a cell phone. My school was only a few miles from home in a nice suburban town, so I decided to walk home. Partway home, a guy in a pickup truck pulls along the road and yells out the window asking for directions to the mall. I did not think anything of it and told him. He then asked me if I could get in and navigate him there since he still was not sure. I was tired and wanted to berate my parents, so I said no and kept walking. It was only a few years ago that I realized he very likely did not want navigational assistance. And to be clear, I was not 14, looking 18. At 29, I get mistaken for 22, and at 25, I was mistaken for 16. Between my face and the way I dressed, I probably looked 11 or so. I was super lucky that he did not follow me, since soon after where he pulled over, the shops and house grew really sparse, and it was getting dark. Thankfully, my friend's mother saw me walking and picked me up a few minutes later too. Still creeps me out to think that if I had been less mad or tired, I may have gone with. I was very naive. 27th story. One warm afternoon when I was about 4 to 5 years old, neighborhood kids, my brothers, and I were playing outside our townhouse area. We were playing hide and seek at the time, and this one creepy-looking neighbor was watching us. After some time, I was looking for a place to hide, and suddenly this guy pulled me inside their house. I did not know how to react. I was getting pulled, while all my playmates were looking for their hiding place so they did not notice. I remember saying, please let me go, over and over, wriggling my hand out. He said he had candies to give out, but it still did not calm me down. Inside, he had me sit down on the couch and he sat beside me, his hand on my thigh. I was frozen in fear trying to understand the situation, but I was just scared. Luckily, his sister-in-law went in, saw us, and hurriedly took me away from him. He was angry at her as she proceeded to tell him that she would report him again. She took me outside, apologized for the whole situation, and locked their gate. It turns out that the creepy neighbor of ours was a drug addict and was already done with rehabilitation, but had been doing other things apparently. I never realized how terrible what happened to me was until I saw him again a few years later, and a suppressed memory was triggered badly. 28th story. When I was a lot younger, around 7 to 8 years old, my uncle used to live with us. He would act as the babysitter on the weekends while my parents worked because he had weekends off. Well, when I was young, like any other boy, I was super into wrestling. My uncle knew that I was passionate about it and always offered to wrestle with me. At the time, I thought nothing of it, but every time we wrestled, he would always do this move where he would trap my hands in between his thighs. My natural instinct would always be to try and free my hands from his thighs. So I would start trying to pull away, moving my hands around, but him being an adult would overpower me. I would feel a hard object in his basketball shorts when we would wrestle. But being that I was young and did not know what boners were, I just ignored it. Once I got older, I realized what was happening. He would offer to play wrestle, knowing I would say yes. Then he would trap my hands in between his thighs, knowing I would move them around, trying to escape. which would lead to me rubbing up on his dick. I never told anyone, and I still see him at family parties here and there, but I avoid him whenever I can. My uncle would play wrestle with me and make me rub up on his boners. 29th story. I am 23 years old now, but when I was around 6 years old, my uncle took me and my little sister to the park right behind our house. After a while, he said it was time to go home. I was not the most obedient child, and he gave up and took my little sister home while leaving me alone at the park. I could not care less until a teenage boy came over, maybe late teens, and said he wanted to play with me. I remember feeling a little uncomfortable, but then he laid down under one of the slides and told me to come over because he wanted to show me something. I started to walk over, but then I got scared and took off running and went back to my house. I always remembered this really well, and for years I was not sure why I got scared and ran. But looking back on it, I really think I would have gotten molested if I went under the slide with him. 30th story. Here's my own story. When I was in preschool, this girl in my class would always bring up disturbing events happening at home. I remember one time specifically when we ate lunch one day, she casually, completely out of the blue, said, "Oh, by the way, yesterday my dad slammed my mom into a wall and then beat her up on the floor." Throughout the whole year, she told similar stories, and I always forgot about it when we moved on to something else. It was not until a few years ago that it all came back to me, and I was shocked that a poor 6-year-old girl had to see this with her own eyes. 31st story. One day, Mother was in the garage revving the car for a long time, filling it with fumes. I came in and asked her what she was doing. I now realize she was trying to take her own life. 32nd story. I was once casually telling a friend that once I was locked in my room with a bucket and no food or drink for 2 days to a friend and laughed at how gross it was. His face went pale as he said, "That is the most fucked up punishment I have ever heard." It was then I realized how awful my childhood was. 33rd story. I found a condom on the school ground. Not in a packet. I thought it was a balloon. I brought it home, blew it up, and played with it, until my mother came home and with a look of horror asked where I got it. When I told her, she screamed at me to throw it away. I was so mad at her because she would not tell me the reason. Nope, still cannot laugh about it. 34th story. When I was a kid, my family had an all-white cat that I loved, and his name was Coke. At the time, I thought he was named after Coca-Cola. It was not until later in life that I realized my favorite cat was named after cocaine. 35th story. Some kid, about 6 or 7 years old, I was hanging around with in a playground, ran off and chased another kid, 4 or 5 years old. Then he tackled him, pulled down the younger kid's underwear, and smelled the kid's backside in broad daylight in the playground. I remember he said backside smell with a stupid grin on his face. 7-year-old me had no reaction. I know I never played with that kid again. 36th story. I learned how to make scrambled eggs at the age of 6 from the guy who sold my mother and stepfather cocaine. I thought he was a friend. That is how he was introduced to me. My siblings and I were hungry. I am the oldest. My brothers were 5, 3, and 1. And I was trying to make scrambled eggs for us. The cocaine dealer showed me how. It is all sorts of fucked up, but at least he kept a 6-year-old from getting badly burned and helped me feed my siblings. We ended up okay. My grandfather, my mother's dad, helped us. I did not realize until I was much older just how fucked up that was. 37th story. My mother just handed me lamp oil instead of water while I was 3 years old. Back when I was younger, I believed her when she said it was an accident, but now it feels more and more like an attempt at a late abortion. I stayed at a hospital under supervision for 3 weeks after that, and my lungs are still damaged. And I heard that the doctor told my mother that if I had vomited that out, it would have damaged my throat further and probably killed me. 38th story. Definitely when I found a small hoop in a jewelry dish on my mother's dresser. I was 12 years old and thought it would be so cool to wear the hoop as a lip ring. My mother sees me and looks horrified and tells me to put it back and stay out of her shit. 10 years later, she finally tells me what that hoop was. It was her clitoris ring, everyone. 39th story. When I was 13 years old, I was at a public swimming pool with my best friend. This guy came up to us while we were jumping in the deep end and said he worked for a travel magazine and wanted to get pictures of us swimming and diving in the water. I did not think anything of it at the time, but I now realize it is possible he just wanted to get pictures of young boys in swimsuits. He asked us where our parents were at one point, and initially my friend and I were there by ourselves, but my friend saw his parents enter the water park a few minutes before. The guy got his pictures and that was it. I am fairly certain you cannot photograph children outside of the presence of their parents. 40th story. When I was about 5 years old, my mother used to shove me in closets and hold the door closed. No matter how much I screamed, cried, and banged on the door, she did not open it. I do not remember how long she kept it closed, but every second felt like an hour. She thought that would help me with my fear of the dark. I am 23 years old and I still cannot sleep with the lights off. When I last talked to her about it and told her about how wrong it was, she giggled and said, "Oops." Thank you for watching this video to the end. Write in the comments below the video, what is your bad childhood memory that you realized it was bad only when you got older? And don't forget to subscribe to our channel not to miss new and interesting videos. And I also advise you to watch our other videos.